So good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have a few minutes to talk to you about some of the important work that we've been focused on at Charter Communications. I'd like to start first by thanking Carol and the team at NOD for giving us a brief opportunity to share our story, and certainly for the opportunity to Mark to join this panel this afternoon with Amy and Simon. We really believe that diversity and inclusion, inclusive of disability inclusion, will make us a much stronger and a more competitive company. We are extraordinarily proud to be in such a rewarding and innovative partnership with NOD. I've known Carol for many, many years and continue to be thankful and grateful for her friendship and her guidance. We are appreciative of the opportunity to serve on the Corporate Leadership Council for the last couple of years. And Carol is also a member of our External Diversity and Inclusion Council at Charter, which is an external body that provides us with advice and guidance to help us advance our diversity and inclusion efforts. We were really pleased to have her join us a little over a year ago in Denver to meet with our accessibility team and learn a little bit more about the work that we do to try to ensure that the products and services that our company offers are available to all customers, and in particular customers who have different abilities. We are very proud to also sponsor NOD's Look Closer campaign because, thank you. We think it is incredibly important for us to encourage employers to consider individuals with disabilities and the incredible value they bring to the workplace. We are happily renewing our commitment to the campaign, including working with NOD to produce a powerful public service announcement that features Paralympic skier Bonnie St. John. And we're looking forward to a screening of that PSA later today, so I hope you enjoy it. As we know, nearly 13% of Americans reported living with a disability in 2017, and for Charter, that very likely means that several million of our 26 million customers are in fact living with a disability, either physical or cognitive. We also know that companies that embrace best practices, employing and supporting people with disabilities, consistently generate 28% higher revenue than their peers and 30% higher profit margins. At Charter, we recognize, as you do, that accessibility and inclusion are critical to attracting and retaining the best talent and ensuring that we are most effective at reaching our many customers. In 2016, we formed a Spectrum accessibility team so that we could create an empowering and inclusive experience for our customers. Today, the team has 21 individuals led by Mark, over half of whom have disabilities and rely on assistive technology every day to do their jobs. Mark will talk a little bit more about this during the panel discussion. But we also want to talk about how this team is really helping to drive a corporate-wide policy and approach to accessibility. Across the rest of our company's business units, which employ nearly 100,000 people, we're working to foster a culture of inclusion through practices aimed at improving the employee life cycle, raising awareness and empathy and understanding among our workforce, and leveraging our external partnerships. We encourage employees with disabilities to talk to their managers about how to configure their workspace and ensure that they have the tools they need to do their jobs. We also provide trainings for those who will be working alongside the new employees to understand their peers' ability and how to best work with them respectfully and effectively. As employees look for ongoing support and career development, they can tap into our recently launched business resource groups. I also want to give Mark another shout out because he is actually the co-chair of our ABLE business resource group, which is our affinity group for disabled employees. Another program that we've launched this year is called Charter Inclusion Talks. And it's an opportunity for us and the company to really sort of tap into the wealth of experience of our employees and have them share their personal narrative with the broader organization. And we were really proud earlier this year to launch 4 programs across different heritage and identity months, and we're going to be working on doing a program focused on disability awareness in just a few short weeks. So we think that it's really important because these programs help all of our employees, but in particular employees with disabilities, advocate for themselves and each other. And we're continuing to work on building an intranet site so that employees can learn more about each other. Finally, external partnerships like the ones we have with NOD are an important part of Charter's commitment to diversity and inclusion. In addition to strengthening our ability to attract talent and better serve our customers, it provides us with opportunities to educate our employees on disability inclusion, which in turn help us achieve our diversity and inclusion goals. While many companies have made progress in recruiting and employing individuals with disabilities, there is still so much to be done, and candidly, there's still a lot of work for Charter to do. We continue to be committed to many of the companies that are represented in the room. We want to make sure that we can drive progress forward, which is why we find it so important to play such a critical role in today's meeting, and we're very appreciative of the opportunity to just share a little bit of our story with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As somebody who works for an organization that provides accessibility as a service to many organizations such as yourselves, we get an opportunity to get exposed to a lot of different ways, a lot of different workplaces, incorporate and factor digital technologies into their environments, whether it's assistive technology in an accommodation type setting, could be for a customer, could be for an employee, or whether it's implementing best practices and your coding requirements internally, ensuring that all your technologies that you deploy are as user-friendly and as accessible to as many people as possible. There are a lot of ways that organizations approach and tackle these issues. Today we have an exciting opportunity to talk to two leaders in their respective sectors that I have never had the pleasure of working with or even meeting until today. So I'm really excited to just drill down. We had a great introduction there to the Charter's commitment and all the high-level great stuff you're doing. So why don't we jump right into, Mark, can you tell us a little bit about how you're adopting technologies, the digital transformation, very much in the employee context? We could expand it as well into other areas. Please
Sure.
Go from there. Thank you.
So first of all, let me say, I feel like I'm in the hot seat because we've had phenomenal speakers today. So let me explain to you, I'm an organizational specialist, right? So I think we heard from this morning that we surround ourselves by very smart people, and that's what I've done. I've got a very seasoned team of technologists that are very smart in this group. I think we talk a lot. I've heard all kinds of great things today. I've learned a lot already. But we are in the design team. That's where we're located. So I've been in this space many, many years at a competitor for 40 years before I joined Charter. And we were compliance there. Here, I'm actually in the design team. My boss is a leader in the design field. My people sit with the designers and developers. So when we start thinking from the beginning about products or services or even internal tools, we're there. We're there at the table. We actually have a seat at the table and we start thinking about accessibility from the beginning. So I think I heard that several times already today, but I can't stress enough how important it is to be there in the beginning, because it's usually not more costly, it's not more timely if you start thinking about it in the right phase of technology. So my team is, we've mentioned several times, over 50% of people with disabilities, including myself, who I have low hearing. So I depend on technology to be able to communicate with the world. And so you can't design products and services for people with disabilities without including people with disabilities. So I think that's my philosophy, and luckily Charter's adopted that philosophy as well. Our Spectrum is our customer-facing brand. Charter is our mother company. But Spectrum has embraced that as well in everything we do. So we've talked about culture. I will tell you, we are changing the culture, and that is the only way we can do this. It's not, it is by storytelling, it's by all the things we've talked about, but the culture is what we have to change. And when you come to the Denver campus, and I think Carol can attest to this, it's not unusual for me to walk down from my office and go, say I'm going to another floor and walk by someone that's using a cane to navigate the building, by someone that might be in a wheelchair, or I might be on my Bluetooth talking on the phone when it looks like I'm talking to myself because it's all in my ears and I'm not having to hold anything. But it's not unusual. That is the culture. That's what we've created. And our designers have embraced that culture. So it's not strange for them to come and ask, hey, I'm thinking about this new product, and I just got to thinking about someone with hearing or someone with vision issues. What would you do? Or bring us ideas. So that is what we have to do. That's how we change the world. We change the culture. We change where people are more comfortable with people with disabilities, where it's not unusual to have someone with disabilities, whether they're visible or invisible in your organization.
That's very, very interesting. We talk a lot about culture, and you guys, your commitment, and you get it. How did it all begin? Like, why is Charter such a leader? Why does Charter get it? Not every other organization gets it. What sort of insights do you have there that can get everyone sitting here to go back to their organizations and get them to get their people to get it and embrace this with the same degree of enthusiasm and resources as you guys? What's the secret?
Well, obviously the law helped, right? The law always helps when we have legal requirements. But I will tell you, we heard it earlier, this does have to start from the top, but it can't stop there. And I will tell you, we have very dedicated leaders that all have their own personal reasons or personal stories. So I would tell you, it is the leadership style at Spectrum to embrace diversity. So without that, you can't do it. So, I mean, we've heard, I always think I'm original, and then after I listen to everybody talk today, I realize that I repeat a lot of other people. But I mean, I always talk about I'm a storyteller, that's my job. I go out and tell a story because unless someone has empathy, and that's empathy for everything, it's not just people with disabilities, it's people of all kinds of abilities and differences. So we tell stories, and that's how we connect the dots. And when you start telling those stories and you celebrate those small wins, I've heard that 100 times a day, and I say it 100 times a day, because when you're working with a business as large as Spectrum, the way you make a difference is when someone does something really, really small, you act like it was really, really big, right? And you go and tell them how great they did, and we publish it in a newsletter, and we send them award points from Spectrum Awards, and we do all these things to celebrate things that aren't that huge, but when you make people feel that way, then it empowers them to go do more. And so that's why I would say all the things you've received today about celebrating small wins. And, I'm not going to tell you to walk away from your job if the leader doesn't have it, but it does have to start with the leadership.
So when you have that level of commitment, you make it sound easy. Like the organization's behind you, and obviously it's still not easy. There are still challenges. Where even at your level do you still encounter barriers within your own organization? Like, what is the limit, the rate limiting factor in your ability to integrate, aside from, of course, the limitations of technology and feasibility on that sort of front?
Well, I will tell you, there's very few limits in technology that we haven't solved for. So that's the myth. I think where it is we talked about today. Me and Rhonda were shaking our heads when someone was talking about being told no. I don't think it's no 5 times a day. I think it's no 500 times a day. So I think that's the barrier. The barrier is not, people are very busy. We are very passionate in this field. And I think one of the things that helps is, because I came from the business segment into accessibility, I can help my team understand the business sense as well. So we do have to make money. The way we get paid is to make money. So I think the challenge is when you're going to a business unit and you're telling them you have to do this thing, and they're saying, well, I have to make this date, I have this goal, I have this commitment, is convincing them, is listening. We heard that today, as being a good listener, and then understanding how you can incorporate the strategy in their current strategy. Like, sometimes we have to celebrate a small win and say, look, you can't release this product unless it's accessible. But if you do these few things, it will make the product predominantly accessible, and we're going to work with you on the rest. And before it actually gets released, we're going to fix all these things. So I think it's the way you approach, but I think the barriers are convincing all the groups you work with that accessibility is not an option, it's actually a requirement.
Great. Amy, so when I endeavor to explain assistive technology to the uninitiated, and I try to introduce them to what it is and where they maybe have seen it in their day-to-day lives, I always invoke the image of Stephen Hawking using his elaborate contraption that was built for him by none other than Intel. So the smartest man in the world was empowered by Intel. I understand on a gratis, pro bono basis, and your organization took the initiative to do that. So that tells us something about Intel, something special there. Tell us your personal story, your corporate story. How is Intel doing disability well now, beyond that obvious major contribution?
Thanks, Simon. First of all, again, thank you for having me here. Super excited. I am fairly new to talking about my own disability and working with organizations dedicated to helping other organizations focus on accessibility and disability inclusion over the last year. And every time I'm at an event like this, I am so inspired. I learn so much. So keep repeating yourself, because there are new people and we're continuing to learn. So in my own organization, I run digital business solutions and focus on breaking the barriers with technology to help accelerate growth for Intel. Intel, as you mentioned, has a history of innovating, making the impossible possible. And the work with Stephen Hawking back in 1997, I think it's just because you can't speak doesn't mean you don't have something to say. And so how do we use technology to not only help build products into design? So certainly it's kind of like I came out of the cybersecurity world before this, and it was before we used to think about building security in, but it was kind of an afterthought, and so we shifted that mindset to security afterward, to building it in. Same with accessibility. We need to start and build accessibility into our products. So we believe it's important to embed people with disabilities into your design teams. If you're thinking about designing for accessibility, and I look at the theme for today on the modern workforce, we had a team working on our workplace of the future that was across HR, corporate services, IT. I sit in IT. And they brought to the table all of these great ideas. And I was actually sitting there looking at this going, I'm not going to be able to be successful at Intel. I wouldn't be able to work in any one of those environments. And I know many of my colleagues who wouldn't either. So I said, hey, who's on your team that has a disability that's also thinking about designing the modern workforce for all people? And so these are the kind of questions that we're bringing to the table. Because in a large organization, any organization, but certainly in one like Intel, accessibility and disability inclusion is so far beyond diversity and inclusion. So Intel a couple of years ago, came out to the industry and bold statement on representation of women and underrepresented minorities. We met that goal 2 years early, but it's beyond that. It's about disability inclusion, and accessibility goes across HR, IT, corporate services, product development. So how do you build a structure and an organization with the business to understand that, that innovation and the value that brings? So those are some of the things we're focused on at Intel.
A big theme we've heard today during the sessions is obviously the idea of building trust and the idea of disclosure. And you shared your personal story and the response that it generated inspirationally within the organization. Is that something you could perhaps tell everyone, or I'd be happy to get it?
Yeah, sure. It was a year ago in October coming up, for Disability Awareness Month. And my team, a few of the people, I've hid my disability for 25 years. I was 19 when I found out I was already deaf in one ear and soon would lose hearing in the other. And I always felt it was something I needed to hide to be successful. Over time, and as my hearing progressed, I had to tell and share a few people. So they said, hey, we really think you should share this out to all of Intel. We have over 100,000 employees. I said no, not only no, but hell no. Then they asked me again, and I said no again, and I said hell no again. So after 3 months of convincing me, I actually researched other leaders in the industry. And I'm an engineer, and I like a lot of data. And I thought, wow, there's a lot of people sharing stories, and they've made this impact, so maybe I could impact somebody. I shared my story, and within 3 weeks, over 5,000 employees at Intel reached out to me. So this is not just about hiring people with disabilities. This is people in our own workforce. And what people didn't realize is I was actually considering, do I need to leave Intel? I don't know if I'm going to be able to continue to be successful, because as a leader, I had to do large open forums with over 1,000 people in them, and Q&A was about impossible. We weren't doing captioning at events. I was having struggles with large video collaboration with 10 video rooms and Skype calls, and I mean, it was. Now I'm leading assistive technologies. I'm leading pilots, bringing in, we have captioning at all of our events. And by the way, captioning, 80% of people who use captioning are not just deaf or hard of hearing. It helps people on the range of autism. We have a global company. It helps people with English as a second language. People are coming up, they're more engaged, they're more concentrated, and they comprehend more with captioning. So this is about designing for all. And so these are some of the things we're doing. I have technology that now when people who have hearing aids that can Bluetooth in and walk around and hear, they walk into a conference room and they can Bluetooth in to the other video rooms and hear their audio in addition to the people in the room. So I was thinking of leaving, and now I'm leading ways to how do we break the barrier with technology. And these are the kind of stories that we need to bring to our management and our senior management and get other senior leaders to share. Because when you talk about changing the culture, it's about creating that psychologically safe environment. And believe me, Intel, it is a tough place to come forward. And we're now, getting lots of people to share and ask for help, ask for accommodations so they can be the most productive.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
I'm passionate about this. Thank you.
So back to Mark and let's bring it back a little bit more back to the workplace in terms of technology, accommodation, and inclusion. People here, the theme of this session is what can we do to integrate people, to leverage digital technologies. They need something bite-sized they can bring back. We can't become a charter overnight if we're not there yet. Is there something, what would be the next step on the path? Is there something you want to share that would be like to keep motivated, that must-have technology? We often hear about accommodations aren't that expensive. There's a perception within organizations that, to accommodate the employee is going to be so onerous, it's just not feasible. These are the common refrains and excuses that are tossed about. What do you tell people that want to go back and do something?
It's so accommodations. Sometimes my opinion and comments don't always resonate with everyone, but accommodations are individual. So I think you need to think about accommodations as individual. As I look across my workforce, I have numerous employees that use assistive technology for vision, and not everyone uses the same type of technology. So, where we talk about centralized groups and where we talk about centralized accommodations, you've got to go further than that. You've got to talk to the person. You've got to figure out what works for that person. And I will tell you, it is relatively inexpensive. Sometimes spending a couple of thousand seems like a lot of money, but the employee can be so productive. So I would tell you, you have to consider each employee individual on the accommodations and do what's right for them. Some of my younger employees like different things than someone that's seasoned like me. I still like pen and paper. But those are the things you've got to consider, because when we talk about an inclusive workforce, we're not just talking, and we're seriously, when we talk about people with disabilities, you've got to think about, and I heard it today talking about Ron, I think it was you talking about training adults. Not only are we training adults, we're training adults that learn differently. There's 15 or 16 different kinds of learning styles. So you got to figure out how to do that. But from an employee perspective, charter still has a long way to go, by the way. There's still a lot of things that we have to improve on. But what we realized when I got to charter, and I can speak for other major corporations because we're in several organizations that we work a lot with the other major organizations. We had concentrated so heavy on our customer base, like let's make our products and services accessible. We forgot about our employees. And so I will tell you, the last year and a half or 2 years, we've been playing catch up for our employees. A lot of people build organizations like mine where you bring in people with disabilities and you put them at a desk and nothing works, right? The databases, the systems aren't, so we've actually dedicated a full-time employee on my team that looks at nothing but internal systems. Of course, it's hundreds of systems, right? And we're prioritizing by what? But we want employees to be able to come to work, and if they want to go look at vacation time and schedule their vacation, they should be able to do that on their own. And those are the types of things I would tell you to look at from an accommodation perspective and think about. And if you're not a huge company and you can't go out and hire a huge workforce, there is so many resources out there. There's so many advocacy groups or disability organizations that they might be advocacy on one side, but they also need to make money. And the way they make money is by offering help in testing and looking at products and services and helping you in those things.
One more final question just before we go to the audience. Do you track these like in a central sort of manner, like in the Office of Disability or Accessibility? Have you designed your own sort of tracking system to do that? Did you gather statistics on that, like successful and outcomes?
Are you talking about tracking accommodations?
Yes, like in other words, do you gather requests? Yeah.
So I will tell you, we don't have a centralized tracking. We have centralized tracking from employees that have, that need accommodations, and we track it from a perspective of what works good. Can we use that again? But we don't. I will tell you, we don't have a centralized location that all accommodations are delivered from. They are individual to the business.
Decentralized. Okay.
Yeah. We have centralized. We have case managers that are ADA case managers within HR that are highly trained in the U.S., and we're looking at what would we do to scale that so that we can, because as you mentioned, it's so individualized. What I might need versus someone else is very different, and it's also dependent on my situation. So I need to work with my case manager to say, this is what I need in this kind of meeting versus this kind of meeting versus this kind of setting. And that's important to have that relationship with that person.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to turn to the audience for questions.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. This question's for Amy. A little personal, but why were you resistant to share your personal story and your disability?
The question is, why were you resistant to share your story at first?
Resistant?
Yes.
Thank you for asking. I was always working hard to be successful in spite of my disability. And now when we talked about being unapologetic before, people can't stop me. I am passionate, I have a disability, and I'm proud of it, and I'm understanding that strength behind it. I was at a conference earlier this year, many of you might know, where they're bringing in next-gen leaders, and we're interviewing next-gen leaders, and I lost my hearing during engineering school. And at the end, of school, I thought, how am I ever going to get a job? And I was interviewing. I did everything possible to make sure they didn't know I couldn't hear them. I got voted best eye contact. I was reading lips. So when I see, thank you, when I see some of these next-gen leaders standing up, owning it, that's what I want to help people do. I want to help people in our own workforce recognize that their disability is a strength and that we value it. And I think the more we can do that, we can help people self-identify.
Andrea Sassman, Eli Lilly and Company. I have actually two questions, but they are connected for each of the panelists. So in charter, since you're so inclusive, there are so many people working there with disabilities. How about the disabilities you mentioned so far were all physical? How about people with mental disabilities? And connected to that, at Intel, where are we with technologies for mental disabilities?
So the questions are basically, it sounded like Mark at Charter, they're very physical centric. Wanted to expand on what they're doing around mental health. And at Intel, what is there being done around mental health in a technology context?
So from my perspective at Spectrum, there was two groups that I feel like when I got there that we weren't including, and one of them is neurodiversity. So we are looking at that very close. I actually do have a team member with cognitive issues that we work very closely with on like making sure things are easy and if you can remember, tactical, the button. So we are working. I'm not telling you we've got hundreds of employees, but we are looking at that. We are building personas now with cognitive and diversity inclusion all the way around. Last week we just did a panel and Denver has a big program called Denver Startup Week. And it's kind of like a South by Southwest. It's the largest entrepreneur free gathering in the U.S., and it happens to be in Denver. And we talked about anxiety as a disability. We talked about motion sicknesses, and so websites that move that make people get sick. So we are incorporating those, and the others are seniors. And I will tell you, when you start looking at building seniors into your personas, you start gathering so much valuable data, because not only do you gather someone that's learning about their disability at a different age. I lost my hearing in my 40s. I learned different than someone that was born deaf, right? And you also talk about multiple disabilities as you get older, and I tell everybody all the time, be selfish. Think about yourself, because if you live long enough, you're going to have a disability, whether it's permanent, temporary, situational, whatever it is. But I will tell you, those are some of the things that I think companies are starting to gravitate to and understand that we don't have enough research, right? We don't have enough data, and we're starting to gather that. And we have been working with organizations like NOD to gather some of that information as well.
Did you want me to talk about Intel?
Oh, yes.
One of the things I think is really important that we've been doing is helping our population understand what a disability is. Many people are not aware of the broad spectrum of what disability is. So part of our Count Me In campaign and self-identifying is making sure they understand the breadth of disabilities, what it does include in that mental health awareness and things like that. And so specifically on technologies we're working on, we have some things that we're working on even for anxiety and post-traumatic stress with veterans, where we're, with our technology of hardware and software incorporated, we can look at biometrics and help people understand when their anxiety level is such, and we help them with more mindfulness. And so this is actually then again a technology that we're rolling out to employees that just can be better health awareness, because we all have high anxiety in the worlds we live in today. And so these are again some technologies that start for mental health awareness, but that can be helpful for all of us. So those are some of the specific things we're doing.
This question is for Mark. Mark, this is Clint from Altice. We just met a little while ago. It's good to see a fellow brethren of the telecom industry up there on the stage. I'm leading an ERG group with Altice called Altice Access for employees and customers with disabilities. And one of the things we're starting to tackle is putting together policies and training for management that are customer facing, both from over the phone, also from employees that are going into people's homes, and employees who are in our stores and are interacting with customers who are disabled. Are there any policies or training that you guys are doing at Charter in order to tackle that issue and to better educate and create a more sensitive employee group?
Absolutely. So on my team, I actually added this last year. She's been there about 6 months now, but we realized that training was a huge issue, and disability training can be so different. So we needed technical, and we just needed one-on-one, right? How do you treat a customer and employee with disabilities? What's different? So we actually brought in a professional trainer that was in our professional leadership development team, and she's actually designing those courses now. It's coming from my team. We are working with the different business units. So we do have lots of training, and we're now focusing on job titles. So we're like, a coder needs something different than a developer does when it comes to accessibility. So we're developing those trainings in-house. We use a lot of outside training right now, but we're trying to develop in-house. And then, as Rhonda mentioned, we've got a new BRG, and my raising my hand to be the co-chair was a little bit selfish. And the selfish was from a good heart, because I know that we have tons of employees that have great ideas and innovative ideas and resources. So I wanted to be a part of that organization to be able to use them as a business resource group and tap into that. So we're going to do some focus groups with those employees, and we're going to find out what we need and what we're missing, and we're going to increase it there, as well as toolkits. You mentioned, like, supervisors. If you've never had a person with disability work on your team, it can be daunting. I mean, it can seem like, oh, how would I ever do this? How would I communicate? So we're working on toolkits where we can make it seem more relaxed. And it's going to be through videos and in articles and all types of things. But yes, we feel like training is, if you don't teach people this is not natural, it's a taught behavior. So the only way to do it is to have training. Thank you.
All right. I think that's the end of our session, everyone. Break time.
Thank you.